I just wanted to take a few moments to share this devotion with you. I was reflecting a little bit on something I shared during one of our services yesterday about the difference between Jesus being lifted up in a universal sense and Jesus being lifted up in our own lives. The fact that we choose to acknowledge him for ourselves means that we lift him up in our own lives. But that doesn't stop the fact that regardless of that, Jesus is lifted up. He cannot be any higher than he is now. And the contrast between those two thoughts. And that got me thinking a little bit about the verse that we read in Philippians, where Paul is writing to the church. And he uses this phrase that I've mentioned before: for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. And as I just started to think a bit more about what that really means, or what Paul was trying to get across when he said, for me to live is Christ, there were two simple thoughts that I wanted to encourage you with today regarding that. See, I think for me, when I hear those words, for me to live is Christ, the first thing that comes to my mind is that Christ was the reason for his life, and he is the reason for our lives. As Christians, we choose to live for him. We choose to live not for his approval, we live from his approval, but we choose to live in a way that acknowledges that Jesus is lifted up in our lives, that he is our priority, he is our number one. That if we do indeed love the Lord our God with all our heart, our soul, our mind and our strength, everything else flows with that. The ability to love ourselves truly and the ability to love others out of that comes from putting Jesus first in our lives. So Christ is the reason for our lives. But I think there's another meaning as well that Paul's hinting at here when he talks about for me to live is Christ. It's that sense that not only do we live for Christ, not only are we living in a place that's wanting to acknowledge him, we actually as Christians are understanding that Christ is not out there, someone that we're looking to live for, but he actually resides in us. So there's a sense that we could look at that verse and say, for me to live is actually not me living, but Christ who's living in and through me. And Paul says that himself in another verse in scripture. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. Of course, that doesn't mean that we're robots and we're kind of pulled along by a string as a puppet. But what it means is Christ is the power. Christ is the source. Christ is the fuel, the energy that we have to live everything that he's called us to. So for me to live as Christ means to live for him in a way that honours his lordship over our lives. But it's also a way of expressing that he is in us. As Paul goes on to write in Philippians, we're called to outwork our salvation. Christ is deposited in our hearts, in our lives, and out of that relationship with him, we choose to live. So I want to encourage you with those thoughts today. Is Christ your reason, and is Christ the reflection in your life? God bless you.